Toole. I am a volunteer and I'm also the leader of the Seneca Lake Pure Waters Lake Friendly Living Program. And I'm joined by team members of our Lake Friendly Living Coalition of the Finger Lakes, Laura Bailey, who is the Yates County Cornell Cooperative Extension Natural Resources Educator. And she's also the Aquatic Invasive Species Advisor for the Keuka Lake Association. And then Adam Effler, he is the Executive Director of the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. Next slide, please. So our Seneca, Keuka, and Owasco Lake representatives here today are joined we'll get that going. So it looks like we're still having difficulties with the screen movement. Again, appreciate your patience. Okay, we're on. So we are joined by Canandaigua, Keuka, Atisco, and the Skinny Atlas Lake organizations, and we work as a coalition committed to protecting the health of our lakes. So this Lake Friendly Living Association Awareness Week of Education and Outreach is just one example of the many activities that we all can do together better than one lake trying to do it alone. So we want to acknowledge and appreciate the support from our sponsors and our partners, the Nature Conservancy and the Soil and Water District Councils, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and many of our municipal governments in the Finger Lakes region. So today, and I'm thinking we're going to work to get the presentation up there. Our goal is to provide an overview of practices that can be easily applied at your home or perhaps when you're enjoying recreational activities on the lake. And the practices are segmented into 4 main categories. And let's go 1 slide later, Adam, 2 slides later. Thank you, 1 more slide. Wonderful, 1 more slide. Thank you. So the practices are, again, in 4 main categories: minimize runoff, eliminate pollutants, capture and infiltrate, and manage and prevent aquatic plant growth and invasive species. Next slide. So let's first talk about runoff. Nature's flow of rain and snow onto land, we know, happens regularly and everywhere. This is called runoff. But what happens to runoff is very important. When runoff falls on natural surfaces, it's infiltrated into the ground. When it hits impermeable surfaces, such as pavement, driveways, even rooftops, it moves across the surface and it's not absorbed. And so instead, it runs into waterways like a stream or a creek, which all eventually move into the lake. Next slide. And as it moves, it picks up and carries harmful substances into the lake. You're seeing, here's the list: sediments that can have multiple negative effects on aquatic life and even the physical structure of the lake. Excess nutrients that can contribute to harmful algal blooms, and you've probably heard much about that in the last few years across the Finger Lakes, across New York State. Bacteria and pathogens that affect drinking water. Over 700,000 people in the Finger Lakes area rely on our Finger Lakes for quality drinking water. Ugly and man-made and harmful man-made debris. And also hazardous wastes that poison aquatic life, including even road salt, which increases chloride levels in the lake. Next slide, please. So what can you do around your home to minimize runoff? 3 simple things. You can reduce impermeable surfaces, you can limit lawn size, and you can conserve and use water wisely. And we'll talk briefly about each of them. Next slide, please. So let's talk about reducing impermeable surfaces. As you walk around your home, are there areas that you might be able to convert to a more permeable surface? Maybe using porous pavers or stepping stones instead of concrete walkways? If you are considering a remodel project, think about how much hard surface you might be introducing, and maybe like example, roof lines, and maybe consider that something like building up instead of out. Next slide. So for lawn size, well, we know our lawns are beautiful and somewhat easy to maintain, but did you know that lawns are actually not as good for water absorption compared to trees and shrubs and plants? Native gardens can actually be easier to maintain. They're beautiful and they do a lot to reduce runoff. Next slide. And here's one of our webinars this week. It's all about native gardening. And this is an expert, Dan Siegel from Plantum Nursery, and he's going to be talking about easy lake-friendly native plants to put in your garden. And this is being held on Wednesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. And again, you can see the website at the end or on your chat. This is where you can register. Next slide. So lastly, let's talk about water use. While our lakes offer an abundance of water, when using water on land, we want to use it wisely in order to prevent more than what the land can absorb. So consider these tips. We just talked about native plants and ways you can learn a lot more. Mulch is really a decorative, easy to access, and very functional method to retain moisture. A rain barrel is another very decorative and functional tool, and it particularly comes really handy in the summer months when you get those hot, dry days and you don't have water access. You have it right there with your rain barrel. So even it's something as simple as using a broom to sweep your driveway or your sidewalks instead of your hose with water. And then lastly, if you do have an irrigation system, here are some helpful tips. So simple things. These are the simple ways to start minimizing runoff. So now let's talk about our second main category, which is eliminating pollutants. And I'm going to turn it over to Laura Bailey from Keuka Lake to talk to you about that.
Thanks, Maura. So I'm going to go over some ways with you that can help protect water quality by eliminating pollutants, by minimizing erosion, using good lawn care practices, how to maintain your septic system, not flushing prescription drugs, maintaining vehicles, watercrafts, and other recreational vehicles, reducing household hazardous waste, and cleaning up after your pet. So minimizing erosion is especially important when planning a construction project or other activity that disturbs the soil. So to help prevent sediment from entering a water body during construction or maybe a major landscaping activity, make sure that you preserve existing vegetation wherever possible. Plan to avoid parking or driving heavy equipment near trees, and build a gravel access road to the actual site of the work to help minimize overall site compaction. Make sure to install silt fences or straw bales around work areas to trap sediment, and locate any soil piles away from the road or water, and protect those soil piles with silt fences or hay bales as well. And then if you're expecting rain, keep them covered with a tarp to prevent sediment washing away and into our water bodies. And then following construction activities, plan to replant that area as soon as possible. And until vegetation has reestablished, keep those erosion control measures in place, and always work to divert runoff around the disturbed area. So if you see that you have a little stream forming right through your work area, try to use some of those hay bales or other methods to kind of divert the water around the area so that it's not washing right through it and carrying sediment with it. Next. Good lawn care practices. So you may already be implementing a lot of good lawn care practices like purchasing fertilizer without phosphorus, but make sure that when you're applying it at the recommended rate. You're applying it in fall, which is the best time to fertilize, and that you check the weather before fertilizing and make sure that you don't fertilize right before a storm, and never apply fertilizer to frozen ground. And also consider skipping the fertilizer altogether or mulching your leaves and leaving lawn clippings as a natural fertilizer. And keep leaves and lawn clippings out of the street so that they don't make their way into our storm drains and water bodies, where they'll end up adding additional nutrients to our water bodies. And when mowing, adjust the blade higher to about 2.5 to 3.5 inches. This will help for a healthier lawn by forming better root structure of the grass, and it'll help to better intercept rain. And then use IPM or integrated pest management practices when trying to control pests or any unwanted species in the lawn. Like if you're trying to control mice or voles or other critters that you don't want around, consider IPM practices as your first option. Next. So here's a webinar to learn more about how our current landscaping designs and practices sometimes fail to support our native plants and animals, and in the long run, end up contributing to a declining biodiversity. So join Doug Talame on Monday, May 3rd at 10 a.m. to learn more about what you can do to help reverse declining biodiversity. Next. So let's move on to how to maintain your septic system and why it's important to make sure that you're maintaining your septic system. So maintaining your septic system protects nearby groundwater, the lake, and your health by preventing nitrogen, phosphorus, and disease-causing bacteria and virus contamination. And also make sure that you know the signs of a failed system. So if you see pooling water or muddy water around your tank, drain field, or in your basement, this might be a sign that it's time to check your septic system. And if you notice a foul odor coming from the area of the tank, or your toilet or sink are backing up when you flush or wash your laundry. And also if your grass is getting really bright green and starting to grow much faster and better than the grass in the rest of your lawn, those are some of the signs that it's time to check in on your septic system. Next. And then you should be regularly inspecting and pumping your septic system. You should probably have it inspected about every 2 to 3 years and probably pumped every 3 to 5 years, depending on the size and your usage. And then it's also really important to not dispose of household hazardous waste down the sink or in the toilets. Try to keep paints, chemicals, cleaners, gasoline, oil, and other toxic materials out of the septic system, because these materials end up killing the good bacteria in your septic system, and it doesn't work as well when you kill off the good bacteria. And then keep other things out of the drain that might lead to clogged pipes, such as diapers, coffee grounds, hygiene products, paper towels, and grease. And then make sure to care for your drain field by planting only grass or shallow-rooted vegetation over top of it. And don't park or drive over your drain field. And make sure that water from eaves troughs, sub pumps, or other drains aren't being diverted right over the area of your drain field. Next. So don't flush your prescription drugs. There are many locations in your community that collect and properly dispose of prescription drugs, such as hospitals, pharmacies, and law enforcement facilities. These collection sites may offer on-site medicine drop-off boxes or mail-back programs. So please seek out these methods of disposal. But if you absolutely cannot dispose of your unused medications by dropping them off at a collection site, then as a very last option, please dispose of in the trash, but follow some steps before just tossing them into the trash. So it's recommended that you mix the prescription medicine with some water and then stir it into ashes, dirt, cat litter, or coffee grounds or any other really undesirable substance. And then place this into an outer container, such as a sealable bag or plastic tub. and seal that container with strong tape. Then dispose of these sealed drugs mixed with the undesirable substances as close to trash collection date as possible to help avoid any accidental or intentional misuse of the medication. And then definitely don't conceal any of these drugs in food because we don't want them to be accidentally consumed by humans, pets, or wildlife. Next. Maintain your vehicles, watercrafts, and other recreational vehicles. So fluids from cars, boats, and recreational vehicles can be detrimental to water quality. So make sure that your car isn't leaking fluids onto your driveway or onto the road. If you change your own oil, make sure that you do it properly by catching the oil in a pan. And if any oil does spill, don't wash it down to the drain. Use a special absorbent material and then properly dispose of that material. And if you wash your own vehicle at home, do so on the lawn rather than in the driveway or on another impermeable surface, or take it to the car wash to prevent this soapy water, which contains phosphorus and other chemicals that can harm fish and water quality from entering our water bodies. Next. And then try to reduce your household hazardous wastes. And when using them, use them properly and dispose of them properly. So try to use the smallest amounts possible. Make sure you're following the label and using the recommended amount. Don't try to use more than is recommended. And then when available, try to use non-toxic and biodegradable products. Recycle when you're able. Again, follow those label directions. Store materials properly to avoid leaks or spills. And then dispose of any unused hazardous products at waste collection events. Next. And then clean up after your pet. So make sure that you clean up after your pet when you're at home, at the park, and on the trail. So when runoff flows across these areas and makes its way to our creeks and streets and into our storm drains, it carries with it harmful bacteria as well as nitrogen and phosphorus. And when that pet waste ends up in our lakes or streams, it decays and uses up oxygen and sometimes releases ammonia. So please bag it and place it in the trash. And then just a friendly reminder that waterfowl are not pets, so we really shouldn't be feeding them. Although ducks and geese really like to eat the bread and other foods that we offer them, it doesn't provide them with the nutrition that they need. And then it also causes them to congregate in high numbers. And when they all congregate in those high numbers, it leads to a lot more quantities of waste, which ends up washing into our local waterways. And I am now going to hand it over to Adam Effler from the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council to talk with you about ways to capture and infiltrate pollutants and manage and prevent aquatic invasive species.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Maura. Capturing stormwater and snow melt and allowing for infiltration into the ground, as well as vegetative uptake, are important steps to reducing unwanted runoff and pollutant discharges to water bodies. 3 recommendations for capturing and infiltration include planting and allowing for the growth of vegetative buffers, fostering a natural shoreline and considering associated ecosystem services, and adding rain gardens to the landscape. Vegetative buffers, or strips of natural vegetation along the shoreline of a water body or a tributary, otherwise known as a watercourse, should cover 50 to 75% of a property's water frontage. Traditional, mostly mowed lawns are not recommended along a water body or watercourse. Traditional mowed and barren lawns may cause excessive plant and algal growth within an adjacent water body or watercourse, shoreline erosion and sedimentation, loss of wildlife habitat, and an increase in nuisance animals. Here is a Lake Friendly Living Awareness Week webinar to learn more about landscaping for shorelines. On May 6th at 3 p.m., as part of this Lake Friendly Living Awareness Week, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Onondaga County's Camille Marcotte will give her presentation entitled Landscaping for Keuka Lake Shorelines. Consider the ecosystem services provided by a natural shoreline. Restoring a shoreline of a lake or water body with native plants restores ecosystem services that include food and shelter for local wildlife, shade for fish and wildlife, soil stabilization and reduced erosion, filtration of pollutants and sediments, absorption of nutrients, and deterrence of nuisance species. Further, natural shorelines can benefit landowners through increased privacy and a savings of time and money that would otherwise be associated with more common lawn maintenance activities, like mowing. Add rain gardens. Rain gardens allow the rain from rooftops, driveways, and patios to infiltrate into the ground instead of becoming runoff. They also help keep water clean by filtering it before it enters waterways, by helping alleviate flooding and drainage problems, enhancing the beauty of yards and communities, providing habitat and food for wildlife, and by the way, we recommend using natives. And lastly, they reduce the need for stormwater treatment structures in the community. Here is a webinar to learn even more about creating an earth-friendly landscape. On May 4th at 10 a.m., as part of this Lake Friendly Living Awareness Week, author Janet Allen will present on creating an earth-friendly landscape. Let's talk some about aquatic vegetation management and prevention. It is important to treat the cause of nuisance aquatic plant growth rather than looking for quick solutions. Also, it is critically important to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Aquatic invasive species can have devastating impacts on lake ecosystems. Aquatic invasive species are detrimental to the ecosystem of a water body and overall water quality. How you manage aquatic life at your residence has an impact. Furthermore, lake recreational activities, including power and non-power boating and fishing, can enable the spread of invasive species. Focus on treating the cause to manage aquatic plant growth. The use of benthic mats, suction dredging, harvesting, and raking can be detrimental if not implemented properly. These actions may lead to destroyed fish habitat, stimulated increased plant growth or spreading in some scenarios and in some species. Factors and impacts should be closely assessed prior to implementation. Please consider contacting your regional soil and water conservation district or Keuka County. These groups can offer more guidance and information on recommending control practices. Let's talk about preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. Please clean your boat and equipment of sediment, aquatic plants, and water to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Be a good steward. Please clean, drain, and dry your watercrafts between ports of entry at various water bodies. Here's a webinar to learn even more about identification, surveying techniques, and reporting of aquatic invasive species. On May 5th at 6:30 p.m., as part of this Lake Friendly Living Awareness Week, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Yates County's Laura Bailey will give her presentation on aquatic invasive species. During this and subsequent slides, I will expand upon additional opportunities posed throughout the Lake Friendly Living Awareness Week. We want that will be a citizen scientist. On May 3rd at 7 p.m., Frank Moses, Executive Director of the Skaneateles Lake Association, will present on what you can do to advance science from your home and around the lake. Lake-friendly living practices are important for businesses too. And on May 6th at 7 p.m., Scott Osborne, owner of Fox Run Winery, and John Santos, vineyard manager of Hazlitt's Winery, will be joined with Michael Thomas Warren to talk about the important practices their businesses are doing to protect our lakes. Just last week, on April 28th, the New York State Assembly passed a resolution commemorating the Finger Lakes community's celebration of lake-friendly living this first week of May. Pictured is our complete list, almost complete list, of scheduled presentations offered during this Lake-Friendly Living Awareness Week. Please visit the Lake-Friendly Living Coalition of the Finger Lakes website to access additional information and register for forthcoming presentations. We are finalizing our details for the Lake-Friendly Living Awareness Week keynote speaker that will be held this Friday, and we will inform all registrants and update the registration page on the website as well when we finalize all details. The Lake Friendly Living Pledge Program, through recommended practices for adoption, is really the backbone of our efforts to advance land and water resource conservation at watershed scale. An example of the pledge form is on the left of this slide. Many resources are available on the Lake Friendly Living websites provided by each lake organization. Please start with the Lake Friendly Living Coalition's website through the Finger Lakes Regional Watershed Alliance to learn more and to access our lake organizations and take the pledge. The website information is provided below at the bottom of the slide. Let's start practicing. Please be an ambassador and talk to your friends and neighbors so we can all be lake friendly. We hope to increase our lake friendly living pledges by 500 pledges across the region by the end of our Awareness Week. Again, please visit our Lake Association's Lake Friendly Living page and take the Lake Friendly Living Pledge today. This is our call to action. Be an ambassador and encourage your friends and neighbors to all be lake friendly. Thank you. Many thanks for attending this webinar, and we sincerely hope you will join us for more throughout the course of this week. With that, this is the end of today's webinar, and we have provided the chat box for questions and comments you might like to share. And I know that my presenter co-hosts are doing their best to move forward with
I think
answering.
there was also, what you'll see in the chat is websites. Again, a lot of these are on our Lake Friendly Living programs, but websites that can help you understand what's going on with your soil, what's going on with your septic system. You're not alone. Basically there's a lot of public resources that can answer your specific questions about your residents. Someone asked about, which I appreciate that, about the, what about farming and wineries in the Finger Lakes? And there is a webinar that Adam highlighted on Thursday night. And it is because so much is going on at the winery level, the vineyard level, to be lake friendly. And so Seneca Lake is hosting, when we are featuring 2 wineries on Seneca Lake, but the reality is I think you'll learn a lot about what's going on across the Finger Lakes. And it's interesting, and it's also a feel good because it's important to know what wineries are doing. I think farming, just to answer a little bit of that, the Soil and Water Councils, they do a lot with the farmers about being lake friendly. And I think if you want to reach out to your particular county Soil and Water Council, you could get more information even about specific farms and areas, maybe to some extent. Laura, maybe you could even speak a little to that because I know you're involved with them.
Yeah, I think reaching out to Soil and Water Conservation District, if you have any questions or concerns, would be a good place to start. They work very closely with a lot of the farms in the region to implement different best management practices. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make sure that we're minimizing any sources of runoff or pollutants that could be coming from agricultural practices.
Yep. Laura, here's one for Keuka Lake as well. The Lake Friendly Living Pledge, you have a card. It's, is it on your website?
Yeah,
or what's the best
we
way to
don't have
get
it. Yeah, we don't have it live on the website yet, but if anybody is interested, please feel free to email me and I can share a pledge card with you. I will put my email address into the chat.
Great. And then someone has a question here about promoting LED flare conversion program. That's interesting. I don't know if I could speak to that. Adam or Laura, can you, or that's something we definitely could look into?
Yes, I can speak to that. So,
Awesome.
yeah, so the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council, and I know at least several other Finger Lakes, have been working closely with a gentleman by the name of Greg Tolomi. He's a steward out of Canandaigua who has been really spearheading promoting LED flares for safety and for pollutant reduction as an alternative to the conventional incendiary flares. And so I think all are familiar with the flares that are commonly used by highway departments and may be kept for safety in our trunks. Those flares do have significant toxic chemicals that when burned are released. And so we are supportive of trying to expand LEDs throughout the Finger Lakes watersheds for both lake protection and for safety.
Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome.
Let's see. You'll see in the chat for anyone, there's some good resources. We have other coalition members on this seminar. So you're seeing like Frank Moses from Skinny Atlas, who's been he's been integral to the coalition as well. And he's given some good websites on things about, or that was Laura, about benthic max. I saw something here from Frank about, I think it was hazardous waste disposal. So I think if there's, again, if we're putting in the chat, if you can't go back and find that, go to the main website and we can answer questions, or you'll find resources there. One of the biggest things we'll advocate is to seek out the information that you need to make the changes that are better for the lake. So we appreciate your efforts in that respect. I'm going to go over to, just thinking, looking at there's others. I think Bill Rogie from Seneca Lake Pure Waters pointed out that, and appreciate that, Bill, that a lot of these like soil and water resources, even Cornell Cooperative Extension, they have either newsletters that they send out regularly with information that's helpful, or webinars that they do. So that's why we're so appreciative to have them all as our partners, because they really help us do so much more that we can't do as just volunteer organizations. So I encourage you to reach out to your soil and water. Each county has their own, but they all work together a lot too. And then so does Cornell Cooperative Extension. They have multiple entities. I'm looking now over at the Q&A. So Adam, do you see these? Yeah.
I'm happy to hop in here for a bit.
Sure.
There
Thank
have
you.
been a number of comments regarding the advancement of the LED flares,
Okay.
and some questions about where to buy them. I would like to share that our local Wegmans has been offering a promotion and working closely with a handful now of our Finger Lakes organizations to sponsor this program. They will start this project, I believe it is as soon as June 5th, if I'm correct, so about a month from now. They will be selling only LED flares moving forward, and a portion of their sales will go to the representing lake association for that Finger Lake. So, so for those who are interested in purchasing the new technology for their needs, please consider making such purchases at your local Wegmans.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maura, it looks like there's a couple questions in the Q&A as well.
Yeah. Do you want to look at the? You can,
Yeah, so one of them is, I have a shale beach that is at the end of my drainage gully with occasional runoff. What can I do to minimize damage? So I can try to address this one a little bit, and Maura and Adam, please feel free to add. But if you own any of the woodlot or area along the edge of that gully, I would definitely encourage you to, take a walk from time to time, see if there's any debris that has built up in the gully. If there is, and you can safely remove it, just move any large debris to prevent that debris from washing out into the lake. And then if you see areas where it's really sparse, maybe the flow of water is creating a lot of erosion because there's no vegetation along the stream side. I would encourage you to, work on vegetating the stream side area with native plants. DEC has a program now. They offer it each spring. It's called Buffer in a Bag. And I believe that it's available to anybody who owns at least 50 feet or more of like stream side or riverside or lakefront property. And they offer a variety of different trees and shrubs that are ideal for planting along these waterways to help stabilize the soil and reduce sedimentation from erosion entering our water bodies.
Laura, there's a question about more information, the buffer in the bag. Is there, I know there's a website, and I know that if you Google buffer in a bag, DEC, it will come up easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really prominent website.
Should, yep. And yeah, and I can get that into the chat, or one of us can get that into the chat really soon. Oh, looks like somebody maybe just put it there.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes,
Lindsay's
thanks,
Canandaigua, so we all work together on this.
And then there's another question about, are zebra mussels still rapidly reproducing? They clear water, don't they? So zebra mussels, it kind of looks like, certainly we have lots and lots of zebra mussels throughout the Finger Lakes. There's, estimated to be thousands, tens of thousands of zebra mussels per square meter at the bottom of a lot of the Finger Lakes. And it's now kind of a mix of zebra mussels and their cousin quagga mussels have been introduced in the last few years as well. And it kind of looks like the quagga mussels are kind of outcompeting the zebra mussels a little bit and sort of dominating the invasive mussel population in the lake. But it seems that we've almost kind of in some lakes reached the carrying capacity of zebra mussels. They are kind of reached a level of where they're not rapidly increasing anymore, rapidly reproducing, but certainly there's still tons of them. So they're not decreasing. They've just kind of reached their kind of maximum threshold for population. And when we first detected them and started learning and talking about zebra mussels, one thing that, a lot of people said was, yeah, they clear water, they do filter water. But it sounds like a good thing, but it's not always as good as it sounds, unfortunately. So as they filter the water, they are increasing the amount of sunlight that can reach below the water surface. So as we get sunlight penetrating the water surface farther and farther down, this leads to an increase in water temperatures. It can also lead to an increase in plant growth. So some of those plants that weren't getting that much sunlight are now getting more sunlight, so they can grow in denser quantities. And it also kind of creates, ends up creating better habitat for some aquatic invasive species instead of some of our native aquatic invasive species. And there is some, looking like there's some connection between some of the zebra mussels and quagga mussels and how they filter different types of algae in the water column. They don't really like the cyanobacteria or the blue-green algae, which is what causes harmful algal blooms. So they're feeding on some of the other algae and spitting the harmful blue-green algae back into the water and concentrating that type of algae in the water and possibly, having some impact on the occurrence of harmful algal blooms. And then I think there might have been one more. There was a question about creating rain gardens. So there's a lot of information online about rain gardens. We had in the original presentation for this slideshow, there were some short videos about creating rain gardens. So I can try to track those down while we address some more questions and get those in the chat box as well. So there's lots of resources online. You can reach out to Cornell Cooperative Extension in your county as well. They might have some resources, and possibly soil and water conservation, and some of the local soil and water conservation districts might have some information on rain gardens. And but I'll get more information.
Well, and I would also encourage looking at some of the webinars this week, because I'm sure with the, native plants are even part of a rain garden often. So I think if you look through the more in-depth description of the webinars on that website we have, you might see something that particularly interests you that is more associated with a rain garden.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and just, one of the big things when you're building a rain garden and when you reach out to, Cooperative Extension or find some webinars online from a trusted source, just make sure that you're selecting native plants in your rain garden.
And the DEC, and I see someone online, thank you for that, shows the DEC website. They are a huge partner with environmental improvements, and they have a beautiful piece of literature that you can download with native plants and trees and shrubs. And that's a nice resource to just have access to.
So there are several additional chats here that came through. One was provided by Lindsay, again, a great resource through cooperative extension programs and resources that can on helping to build rain gardens. One question that would probably go to you again, Laura, what about raking practices in the lake? Are they recommended?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, certainly, nobody really likes swimming through plants in the lake. But, if you can deal with it, deal with it. If you can't deal with it, it's really important to reach out to someone to get some more information about different management practices for aquatic plants around your lakefront and around your dock. Because if implemented improperly, you can end up destroying fish habitat, fish breeding grounds. And also there's a lot of aquatic invasive plants as well that can reproduce by fragmentation. So when you toss in rakes or other, things that might collect the weeds and pull them out with those. You're breaking up those plants, and some of those fragments of those plants might, drift off to another property, and they can establish a whole new population just by a piece of that plant. All it needs is a little piece to float away, and it can lodge itself in the sediment or mud or debris and take root and start a whole new population. So it's really important to know what plants you're managing and find out what the best way to manage those plants is to prevent any further issues.
Thanks, Laura.
One comment though, as far as raking things into the lake, is leaves are not good to go into the lake.
Gotcha. I guess I thought of the question the other way.
I think you answered the right question, but it just prodded me to think of, because this was something I learned quickly, leaves just bring more, too many nutrients into the lake. They seem harmless because naturally leaves or trees are shedding leaves into the lake, but adding more is not a good idea.
No, thank you, Maura. That was probably the intended question. So yeah, and DEC, again, DEC's got a lot of great resources. DEC has a really great fact sheet about different ways that you can, deal with your leaves each fall. It gives you lots of ideas for mulching, composting, and we can try to get that into the chat as well.
Well, and actually that's a good point. I don't think we mentioned the as being lake friendly, but a compost, which is an easy system to set up in your yard, also becomes a place for your leaf use. I know personally I did this, and all of a sudden it made my leaf raking every fall and in the spring again so much easier, because I could put it into one big pile and it would go into my compost, and it degrades so quickly that you'd be amazed how much you really work through all that matter, that brown matter, and it's not there and as an eyesore so much. So encourage you to look at ways to maybe compost and then using your leaves naturally, along with allowing them to be mulched onto your lawn as you're mowing too. Any other questions? We have, I think the one thing that we're going to figure out when we go into this, putting the recording online, is to capture all these websites and details that we've sent to you, so that it's not just the content of the webinar and us talking, it's the information that's coming out of the Q&A. And we really appreciate everyone who's putting these out here, because it's just more learning. I one more, sources of info on lake weeds that reproduce. So I think, Laura, this is for you. Lake weeds that reproduce from plant fragments. Will it stop if I got bad weeds?
I guess I've not seen the question, Maura.
Timothy John says sources of info on lake weeds that reproduce from plants.
Oh, I see it now.
Yep.
Yeah, so it sounds like the question's asking whether or not there are good resources for more information on those that produce simply through fragmentation. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if there's a resource that lists, the plants, which ones produce by fragmentation, which ones don't. But there's a lot of really great, ID guides out there, so that if you do, you toss in your rake and pull it out, get an ID guide and try to ID the different species that you have. I can, feel free to email me as well. If you have a plant that you're really having trouble IDing, reach out to me and I can help you identify the plant. A big one, it's not present in all of the Finger Lakes, but it is in a handful of our Finger Lakes. And one that we're, trying to actively manage in Keuka Lake is starry stonewort. And starry stonewort is one that, really easily reproduces by fragmentation. So, I would start off by maybe just taking a look at what you have and identifying what you have. And once you know what you have, you can do some more research on whether or not it reproduces by fragmentation. But please feel free, to reach out to me if you've got questions or are struggling with identification.
And Laura, from what I understand, it's one of the greatest challenges with reproduction with these invasive species for many of them is that they are so prolific and spread very easily. And that's why it is so important that we, you know, follow good management practices and clean and drain and dry our boats and act as good boat stewards.
Yes, and invasive species really thrive in disturbed habitats as well. So when we're disturbing, you know, the lake bottom or disturbing the other vegetation in the area, we are just opening up an area for invasive species to settle in.
And for many of the boaters out there, whether you're on the lake or boating, trailering it into a park, you will see invasive species programs stewards who are located at these marinas, and they're looking for invasive species and helping educate boaters to understand, you know, how to prevent them and clean, drain, dry. So take them as someone who's really out there helping the environment, not as someone who's trying to make it a little extra time on your part as you bring your boat out of the water, whether it's a power boat or actually even a you know, a kayak or something.
Here's a potentially a tough question.
Immediate
I
action.
don't believe that I have the answer to is whether or not it's better to bag or leave unbagged your leaves along the curb, and whether or not the speed with which those leaves are picked up could become an issue if they're sitting for too long. I don't know that I know the answer to that. Certainly, if they're left for a long period of time, they will decompose more readily, and there will be more nutrient runoff associated with those leaves and with that decomposition. But the answer between the bagging and just raking to curbside, I'm not sure what the best answer is there. Do either of you two know?
Yeah, I think, Adam, I'm not entirely sure either. Like,
Mhm.
so I guess, you know, if you know the day that they're coming to pick up leaves, I guess try to put them out as, you know, as close to that date as possible. You know, if it, you know, doesn't look like they're going to be picking them up anytime soon, and you see strong winds in the forecast, maybe try to put a tarp over them and weight the tarp down with some weights. But otherwise, hopefully they'll be along to collect them soon. But yeah, certainly if they're sitting there for a while and you know, blowing away, they're going to end up probably in our storm drains. So yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky one, but
Thanks,
Good one
Laura.
we can take back, and we can get information on that too. It's a good question. And working, and that's the one thing why, as a coalition, we all work with different municipalities and, you know, look to see what's going on out there in terms of practices around leaf pickup and bagging versus that sort of thing. So these are really good questions that we can understand and potentially help advance best practices around with municipalities as well.
So we have just 1 minute left. Are there any further questions here? Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's really our pleasure to offer this webinar this afternoon, and we're really hopeful that you feel that you benefited from it and have some interest in joining us for webinars throughout the week. Thanks again.
yes, thank you, everyone.
Take the pledge.